Hello and a very warm welcome to the next in our series of at-home interviews with technology sector business leaders. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Thomas Hansen, Chief Revenue Officer of UiPath. Thomas, really great to see you. How are you and how's business?
Good morning, or in your case, good afternoon. Things are good, thank you. Thanks for the invite, good to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise. Thomas, I'm going to jump right in and ask you about adapting to change and making an impact during the pandemic. I mean, you joined UiPath in April 2020 during the first wave of the pandemic. I'm sure, probably like any leader, you really wanted to make an impact quickly, but restrictions probably would have forced you to adapt. Can you provide some examples of things that you've done differently? And has leading in largely a virtual environment taught you anything new about leadership overall?
Yeah, look, it's been a challenging time for all of us in whatever capacity, function, company, role, geography you're in. I consider myself a very, very lucky guy. Over the years, I've had an opportunity to live and work on 5 continents. And many of the roles I've been in, although it was all pre-pandemic, had a high level of remote work to it, in the sense of I've managed regional teams and global teams where just by the sheer nature, scale, scope of the roles, a lot of the work had to be done remotely. So I don't know, not really through any foresight, but I've been preparing for this moment for best part of 15, 20 years of working remotely. So this was not the first time in my career where I had to hire people without ever meeting them in person. I've in prior parts of my career gone weeks and months without ever meeting my team in person or stepping foot into an office. But of course, this here is at a very different level and dimension for all of us. For me personally, I think there's 3 major lessons I've taken away from, actually, no, there's 4 major lessons I've taken away from this. Number 1, I think the pandemic has taught all of us that things can be done differently. I don't think any of us is going to return to normal. I think it's going to be a new normal. One where you don't always have to be on site. So that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is communication is just harder virtually. So you have to be so crisp and so clear and so deliberate. And you have to over communicate in a larger virtual environment. I have my rule of 7, which is you got to repeat yourself 7 times, otherwise you're not heard. So that's one of the things I do. I get a little bit tired of listening to myself, but that's, that's part of the game, right? Yeah. Lesson number 3 for me is, and this is something I've caught myself in, I've caught my colleagues in, and I see it's happening in other companies where I have friends that are working. And that is, you got to be careful during this pandemic and wanting to over communicate and connecting with people on Zoom or Teams calls or WebEx calls or whatever. You have to be careful in not overdoing the amount of internal calls and internal meetings. So that's something to keep a very careful eye on. And then lesson number 4, in terms of the pandemic and working from home, you better make sure you have a good coffee machine at home, right?
Do you have a good coffee machine, Thomas?
Oh, I do. I love my coffee.
And I think just sort of extending the leadership question for a minute. I mean, you've successfully navigated a career in big tech with 14 years at Microsoft. But since then, you've led some tremendous scale-ups like Box and Carbon Black. When you think about leadership and go-to-market strategy, does the sort of big tech playbook translate well into hyper-growth companies like UiPath, or do you have to sort of tear it up and redefine it entirely?
I've been in sales now for, I think, 117 quarters. So that's around about 1 billion seconds, but who's counting, right? And I'm very fortunate. Not only have I lived and worked on 5 different continents, but I've worked for incredible companies, but incredibly diverse companies in different categories, different stages. And having been in such diverse and fast-moving environments, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You've got to try new things. You got to embrace the fact that rapid experimentation is the name of the game. There's nothing wrong in failing. I don't really use the fail word much, though. I talk more about, as I said, rapid experimentation. But you got to embrace that things have to be done differently. And you got to be careful in falling in love with stuff you built yourself a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because things change, context, environment change. So you got to be always looking yourself in the mirror, questioning if what you have in place really is the correct structure. So look, change is the oxygen we breathe. You got to embrace it in any hyper-growth company. Each quarter will look different than the previous. And yeah, you got to make sure that you continue to get feedback and challenge yourself and question yourself.
Absolutely, and I just want to turn attention a little bit to the transformational impact of automation. And we talked a little bit earlier before we started, around sort of digital transformation being one of the buzzwords of the age, which it, without question is. But UiPath were announced as a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant, I think for the third year running. Still well placed to capture a big share of, I think it's around about 60 billion software automation market. So if you don't mind, can you just talk about what sectors are the most advanced in adopting automation, and in your view, who will in the short term realize the benefit of automation?
Well, look, here's the thing. UiPath is fundamentally reshaping how people work. And what we do is we basically emulate humans. We remove the boring, the mundane tasks so that humans, friends, colleagues, people can go and do what they do best, which is to be innovative, be creative, and truly add value. We are popular in many sectors, including finance, banking, insurance, healthcare, public sector, telecom, manufacturing, retail, and so many other. And in each of these sectors or verticals or industries, they are business units, they are departments, jobs where there's still a lot of manual repetitive work. So for instance, what we're seeing that in every one of these sectors, well, they have a finance department, they have a HR department, many have call centers, most have customer success, and all these businesses have customers and deal with the CRM. And these type of roles that live in systems and processes are primed for automation, where we as UiPath can come in and work with them together with our partners in help of free time. Free time, so those folks, those humans sitting in those roles with a lot of boring, mundane components of their job, we can free that up, we can automate it to ensure that their customers in turn get a far better experience, and that those employees of those companies can go and spend more time on what really matters, better serve the customers in a faster, better way, and apply more creativity and innovation to their day job. In terms of, just to conclude on your question, we've seen banking, healthcare, public sector so far having realized the most amount of benefit, in my opinion. There are a lot of legacy systems and old processes that are now embracing digital transformation. But Mike, it's across all verticals, all industries, all countries. We see opportunity left, right, and center. And it's kind of interesting. When you think about enterprise software, enterprise cloud systems, platforms, that all vendors have good stories around digital transformation. But for most vendors, it's a function of years before those promises comes true. Most enterprise software vendors, cloud vendors struggle with large implementation times and time frames to get into production. UiPath is different. The time for us to get in through deployment, activation, get processes built and get into production is a question of days and weeks, some cases months. But it means that the time to value realization is very short. And as the customers see the ROI, see the benefit of our technology, they expand with us. So we're very, very fortunate in the sense that we have very low churn amongst our customer base, and a very high net retention rate, something we're very proud of. And it all starts with serving our customers well and showcasing value from our platform, from our solution.
And it sort of made me think as you were talking there, for any company, irrespective of size, RPA is something which they could invest in without question. but knowing where to start, that must be a major challenge for any organization, let alone deploying it at scale. Can you talk about the typical roadmap, that companies will go through if they're wishing to adopt intelligent automation? How do they know where to start?
So we can help them directly through our own value engineering and consulting arm, and through our partnership with more than 4,000 GSIs, BPOs, and amazing partners across the world. Now, in terms of getting started, we believe starting larger with a deliberate automation strategy is the best way to start. As I mentioned, RPA is about bringing ROI in a matter of days and weeks, not years. And one of the biggest hurdles in getting started to scaling is being deliberate about the strategy. A key piece around the strategy, and my advice really is to start a COE, a Center of Excellence, and focus on just a few business units with valuable potential processes. I mentioned them earlier on. So build that automation pipeline. Don't just start with one process. And simply seeing these automations work will open up the whole organization's eye to the art of the possible. So we have a whole platform there to help our customers to do this right, from discovering processes to building, to running them, and to monitoring the processes. So yeah, build the COE, build the Center of Excellence, have dedicated resources on it, build the roadmap, then you're set up for success.
Excellent advice. Can I just jump into another layer of detail on that, though? Because for folks watching this, particularly CFOs as an example, they might be thinking, well, the finance function, that needs, dramatic overhauling in many respects. So, I'm keen to sort of bring automation to life through sort of key business processes. You talked about the transformational benefits of automation being freeing up vast amounts of time spent on manual, repetitive tasks for skilled employees. So if you take the finance function as an example, what's the sort of transformational impact of our automation? And can you provide perhaps some examples of UiPath clients that are really benefiting from this now?
Yeah, you bet. Let's take an example from Asia. One of our banking clients in Japan, they have saved nearly $500 million and more than 1 million man hours since they started working with us just a few years ago. And these are stats as of last year, before COVID had made digital transformation so much more relevant. And much of the work for this banking client was in their finance department. We can be tremendously useful, for example, in invoice processing as we combine technologies such as AI, OCR, and RPA to provide full solutions for a customer under one platform, not multiple technologies. Looking at a different industry, one major car manufacturer implemented us just in one of their accounts payable teams. And this particular team processes around 2,000 invoices every day in SAP. And implementing UiPath reduced the time spent on that set of processes by 2/3. And then, I do believe in drinking your own champagne or eating your own dog food, depending on which one you prefer. Those analogies, we ourselves within UiPath have done a tremendous job in automating so many of our finance processes. And we now have over 100 robots working alongside our own finance team. So for example, our whole order to cash processes have more than 10 discrete processes performing many of the mindless processes, such as updating information, populating systems, generating invoices. And this is not about reducing the workforce. It's about allowing our team to be more creative, to be more innovative, and to focus on the more complex cases and exceptions. And that's the journey of humankind and technology, right? As societies have evolved, we find ways of embracing new technology, and that's exactly what enterprise companies out there can do with RPA and automation at large from UiPath. We can help companies to become more productive, more profitable, and also bring more joy to their colleagues' workdays by removing the boring, mundane stuff and allow their colleagues to focus on the fun stuff, the innovation, the creative parts, the higher value add of their roles.
And I suppose my final question, one we haven't talked about, but it's come to my mind just as we're talking. Yeah. Can you talk about how AI will impact RPA? I mean, they're co-joined, obviously, but I mean, what's the impact of as machine learning and as artificial intelligence evolves, as it is, minute by minute? What's the impact on RPA? What's the impact of machine learning and AI on RPA?
Yeah. So think about it this way here. RPA is emulating humans. Think of it as the hands and feet of a human being. We teach the bot to go and execute some processes. Now then, if you take RPA with AI and ML, think of AI and ML as the brain, the human brain. So you now have the hands and feet of RPA, and you have the brain of AI and ML embedded into one platform. You now have opportunity for levels, depth, and sophistication of automation that far supersedes what we've seen before. So we continue to invest into our ML modules. We continue to make significant progress in terms of how we leverage AI on our automation platform. And we see that that is where the real significant opportunity for real non-linear progress is possible with this technology.
Fantastic. That's wonderful insight, Thomas. Thank you so much. I mean, that's all my questions for today, but it just leaves me time to say thank you for your insight. It's been really valuable and much appreciated. My best wishes to you and your family and your extended family at UiPath for the rest of the year.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time. Thanks for everything.